from the Middletown North congregation with a fine Bible discourse entitled, A Cleansed Earth. Will you live to see it? Brother Barker.
Several years ago, there was a popular television program on PBS, and it was designed for children. And what it would do is it would give a description of a geographical area, give lots of clues, and the children would have to figure out where it was. It was called Where in the World is Carmen, Sandiego? You might remember it. Well, this morning, for just a moment, we're going to play a version of that. So first off, I want you, in your mind's eye, to picture this scene. As Carmen walks down the street, she looks and she sees abandoned buildings. Some are starting to fall down. They're completely covered up. They're starting to decay. Over here is a pile of garbage blowing around in the breeze. Over here is an abandoned vehicle. Just everywhere she looks, complete and total uncleanness, destruction, just completely abandoned, run down. Well, where is our friend Carmen? Is she in maybe one of the big cities? New York, Chicago, Los Angeles? Maybe she's a little smaller. Maybe she's up in Middletown or right here in New London. Maybe she's in a smaller town like here in Mystic. No, our friend Carmen is in Antarctica. And let me tell you something, friends. The penguins didn't do this. You see, everywhere that she is, or where we're looking at in Antarctica, is completely abandoned. That was left behind by man, by visitors. And isn't that true of the tendency toward the world today, towards uncleanness? Just dump your garbage wherever and leave it behind and don't have to do anything about it. In psychology, there's actually a term for this. It's called the empty house syndrome. You might remember in your neighborhood there might have been an abandoned house. And as the people first moved out, it looked okay. But then the weeds started to grow. And pretty soon you start noticing broken windows and things falling apart. Yes, just towards total clutter and not towards a clean environment whatsoever. But is that how Jehovah intended this world to be? Did he intend for this entire world to look like that empty house syndrome? Well, turn with me over to 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 13. And we find here that Jehovah makes a promise concerning his intentions. 2 Peter 3 and verse 13 as to what he intends for the world to be like. Unlike what we look at now, he says there, but there are a new heavens and a new earth that we are awaiting according to his promise, and in these righteousness is to dwell. You see, Jehovah tends and leans toward cleanliness. That's what he's always intended for this earth. And when he chose out a people, well, did he tell them to do what they want? Or did he set the Israelite nation up originally as a clean people? Well, once again, let's look at his words. This time at Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 2. And here he's given a command to Moses to pass on to the people. They've been now selected. They've agreed to be his people. And this is what he tells them they have to do. They want to be Jehovah's people. It says, speak to the entire assembly of the sons of Israel, and you must say to them, you should prove yourselves holy, because I, Jehovah, your God, am holy. Well, what does it mean here to be holy? Well, in this instance, he was talking about being clean and pure, to be set apart from those living around them. So if Jehovah intended them to be a clean people, well, we know Jehovah doesn't change. That's what he intends for us as well, that he wants us to be clean. And if we're to live in that cleansed earth, where that righteousness is to dwell, well, we need to start working on that, not when we get to that new world, but before. We need to start now. We see how the Mosaic law originally promoted cleanliness. And in fact, Jesus even drew on that parable of cleanliness at Matthew chapter 23. And we find a very famous quote here to the Pharisees of the time. But we're going to look at it from a slightly different standpoint this morning. There at 23, verses 25 and 26, we read, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you cleanse the outside of the cup and of the dish, but the inside are full of plunder and immoderateness. Blind Pharisees, cleanse first the inside of the cup and the dish, that the outside of it may become also clean. Now, we know here he was speaking about a spiritual cleanliness, but it also applies to the physical nature. See, the Mosaic law was set up to not only separate the Israelites, but to keep them healthy. Think of all the different laws in the Mosaic code that would promote cleanliness. Burying your excrement. Don't touch a dead body. Don't eat certain animals because of being unclean. Those all kept the nation clean, pure. And so it set them apart. And as we said, Jesus even drew upon this example of cleanliness. Well, does it work? Well, notice what one gentleman, a brother from Africa, had to say. I did not believe it at first, admits an African family head named Joseph. He refers to a Bible talk that he heard on the subject of cleanliness. His family lives in a small wooden home, crowded among dozens of neighbors, has a communal toilet and an unpaved walkway. Nevertheless, Joseph and his family tried applying the principles in their home. My children now wear sandals. We wipe our feet. We wash our hands with soap and water and take other cleaning precautions. Says Joseph, the results? I was surprised. The children are sick much less often, and we do not have all the hospital expenses anymore. Notice it wasn't just Joseph who tried to be clean. He entitled the entire family. And so it's not just one member of the family that has to be clean. It's all of us. The entire family, its physical cleanliness is a concern towards all. Once again, another example of this situation, of how this can be applied. Another woman, a sister in Africa, has 8 children living in one small apartment. And she says, how does she keep it so clean and so presentable? Well, all have learned to do their part. If someone spills something, he is given a rag or other equipment to clean it up. They have also been taught to be neat when eating. See, a dirty home reflects not only upon us, but also upon Jehovah. We represent him, we carry his name, and our neighbors know who we are. See, if we were to be dirty, unkempt, unclean, well, then that would depict not only on us, if we're children, not only on our parents, but also on our spiritual father, Jehovah. We represent him. Now, we do know, according to the scriptures, let's turn there, in fact, Titus chapter 2, verses 4 and 5, that the primary responsibility of the home does fall upon the wife. Let's look at that scripture for just a moment. Titus chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. And that they may recall the young women to their senses, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be sound in mind, chaste, workers at home, good, subjecting themselves to their own husbands, so that the word of God may not be spoken of abusively. See, as we just said, a dirty home could cause abusive speech about Jehovah. And it does tend to be the responsibility of the wife. That being said, brothers, would it be in this climate, this world situation today, with so many of our sisters having to work, having to help us to provide a living for our families, would it be kind, would it be Christ-like for us to come home, sit down, and let our wives do all the work after they've already spent all day working? No, that's not how Jesus would have done it. Likewise, neither should we. And that doesn't mean we have to have a fanatical approach. Now, I work in a hospital. We have cleaning crews 24 hours a day scrubbing the floors, scrubbing the walls, cleaning the beds, everywhere you could imagine. Is that how our house has to be? So it doesn't need to be a hospital. It needs to be clean enough to be comfortable, but the floors don't have to be eaten off of. See, it doesn't have to be that and to that degree. It does need to be clean, however. And the same goes true with our cars. See, when we have a dirty car and we take it out in the ministry, don't the neighbors notice? They notice a car that's not normally there. And now at this time of year, it's hard to keep it without the salt and everything else. But do we keep it at least presentable to the best of our ability? See, there's an example of this, was a sister I knew. It was a pioneer sister. And she had this new study. Now, this goes back quite a few years. But remember the old station wagons, the Vista Cruisers, the big long ones with the wood paneling? And see, her Bible study had one of those. And she used to deliver newspapers in it. Now, as the study progressed, she actually qualified to start going out in the ministry, and she was very excited. And so our sister says, well, I will take you out on Monday. I will come and pick you up. And the Bible study says, no, I'm going to be out. I'm going to be delivering the papers. I'll just wear my dress, and I'll come pick you up. So our sister says, fine, that'll work. And so she's standing there out on the street waiting for her study to show, and she finally does, and now she's late. So our sister jumps in the car, sits down, and immediately feels something gushy under herself. And she reaches behind and she pulls out a jelly donut. Now, 2 people had to change that day. Our sister had to change her clothes to be presentable for the ministry, but the Bible study had to change her methods, her outlook. She had to understand what it was like to be clean, that was not an acceptable situation to have to undergo, and that her car, just like her home, had to be presentable so as to not bring reproach upon Jehovah. And when we do such things, it's noticed by others. Think about when we get ready for a convention, all the work that goes into cleaning that. What happens with it? Well, people do notice. In Ireland, one stadium manager, what you did on Saturday was unbelievable. Everybody is just talking about it. You put us to shame. You came along and did the job. It's fantastic. Spain, your cleanliness is unbelievable. If our club wasn't in need of the funds, we would have let you use the stadium for free. Norway, the facilities are turned over to the owners in almost better condition than when the witnesses rented them. And all the work they do on such occasions is based on what they call voluntary service. Yes, it is awe-inspiring indeed. Now, some of you obviously have probably been in this area for a while. You may have gone to district conventions locally here at the New Haven Coliseum when it still existed. Well, do you know that the manager there used to take the magazines? Do you know why? It was because every year when the witnesses would come in and spend all that time cleaning, it was the one and only time that facility ever received a thorough cleaning. Once a year. And because of that, first few years he really was okay, whatever. But then he actually started to listen, and he would start to take the magazines. And we actually met him in door-to-door service, and that was the one thing he said always impressed him, was how clean we made the facilities, how clean we came in as individuals. And then when he left, well, that facility was clean. He knew he would actually leave at times, knowing that when we left, it would be okay, that it would be cleaned, and he wouldn't have to even do an inspection because it would be so clean. Not true of any other group that he had to rent the facility to. See, by how we live today, whether it be here in our Kingdom Hall or at our conventions, or in our own homes, in our own vehicles, on our persons, demonstrates if we truly want to live in that cleansed earth. Are we living up to what Jehovah has proclaimed for us? We need to demonstrate that we want to be there. Now, many of our brothers and our sisters live in beautiful surroundings. See, right now, this might not be the most beautiful area right now with the dirty snow, but in the summertime, how beautiful is it around here? Other brothers and sisters live in tropical areas. How beautiful is it there? But notice what happens sometimes, even when a person lives in a very beautiful area. Like the example of Lot. Let's learn over to Genesis chapter 13. Here, we find that Abraham is saying to Lot, we need to divide. Our people are too numerous. It's causing too many headaches. You choose. You go one way, and I'll go the other. You make the choice so that there's no dispute amongst us. I don't care which side you choose. You go one way, and I'll go the other. So notice in verse 10 what Lot does. So Lot raised his eyes and saw the whole district of the Jordan, that it was a well-watered region before Jehovah brought Sodom and Gomorrah to ruin, like the garden of Jehovah, like the land of Egypt as far as Zoar. Imagine that. That area he was looking at could have been similar in his mind to the Garden of Eden. Talk about beautiful. Touched by Jehovah's own hand is what Lot was saying in his mind. That's where I'm going. Well, did Lot take into account what he was going to have to deal with? See, here he's beautiful area. Oh, it's going to be so easy for me, right? Well, notice what he happens to say in 2 Peter. This time in verse 2. 2 Peter 2, verses 7 and 8. And he delivered righteous Lot, who was greatly distressed by the indulgence of the law-defying people in loose conduct. For that righteous man, by what he saw and heard while dwelling among them from day to day, was tormenting his righteous soul by reason of their lawless deeds. See, he had a beautiful area in his mind, and yet it all became decayed by the people around him. Tortured him daily with what he had to undergo through. That's true also of our brothers today. As we said, many of them live in absolutely astoundingly beautiful areas. Years ago, when all of this area used to be under the Mass RBC, there was a group of us sent down to Panama. We were going to teach a type of construction to the locals and build a kingdom hall. So the area we had to go through was outside the city, and we went through jungle to get there. And as we're there, this absolutely small town, and as we look, man, there's all these beautiful trees, colors of green I'd never imagined even existed. You could hear the wild animals. You could smell on the breeze a smell that was indescribable. And yet, we started to notice after the first couple of days something set wrong with us. It just didn't seem right. So we kind of started to realize that everywhere we went, we saw men with guns. You see, right across the street from where we were building this kingdom hall was the local power plant. And around the power plant, they had 15-foot high fence with razor wire all the way around it so that no one could break in. And then they had armed guards standing at the front. We went to the grocery store, went to the little convenience store. There would be an armed guard with an automatic rifle standing there. Everywhere you went, the brothers had to actually put iron bars on all their windows. And across the top of the walls, they would take liquid concrete, put in glass bottles, and then smash them so that the glass would stick up. Why? Because people would climb their walls and steal whatever you had. So while this looked and appeared to be the most tropical, lush, wonderful place, really the brothers were beating themselves up with what they had to deal with. See, they remembered that scripture, though, that we read at the very beginning, 2 Peter 3:13, the new heavens, the new earth. They were waiting for that righteousness to come, that new place. See, they had to deal with so much. They were tormenting themselves just like Lot. Turn over this time once again to 2 Peter. We'll be going to there a lot. I should have told you that earlier. This time, chapter 3. We'll look at verse 7 and 10. And it goes along with that promise. There it says, by the same word, the heavens and the earth are now being stored up for fire, and are being reserved for the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly men. In verse 10, yet Jehovah's day will come as a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a hissing noise, but the elements being intensely hot will be dissolved, and the earth and the works in them will be discovered. Do you notice something here? The heavens that it's talked about, it says earth's government, so it's what they represent. Those are all going to be done away with in that new earth. The elements, the atmosphere of this world, what promotes, wiped away. The earth, or anything, the human society, the way they act, done away with. Yes, anything that's out of harmony with Jehovah's input, with what Jehovah wants, according to the scripture, will be destroyed. There is no doubt about it. He makes another promise to us. This is just a few pages over in Revelation chapter 11. And there in verse 18. It says, but the nations became wrathful, and your own wrath came, and the appointed time for the dead to be judged, and to give their reward to your slaves, the prophets, and to the holy ones, and to those fearing your name, the small and the great, and to bring to ruin those ruining the earth. Can you think about some areas where the earth might have been ruined recently by mankind? Look at all these natural disasters. But doesn't man have a role in them? Doesn't man alter the environment to cause some of the situation? Or what about just something man has done all out on his own? Remember the Exxon Valdez in Alaska? Pristine wilderness, completely polluted for 20 years. Chernobyl over in Russia. At this point, you still cannot go in the area in parts of it. Now nature's starting to clean itself. Jehovah's way of designing the earth has allowed these areas to start to be cleansed on their own. But mankind has caused such destruction. And that's what Jehovah is saying. I'm going to finish this. This has to be done away with. Those that are causing these problems must go. That's not how I want the earth to be. That's not what I intended. It will be done away with. You see, we need to remember that this world has a warning sign on it. Have you ever seen a construction site where they're redoing, maybe it's an old building and it had asbestos in the past? So they'll come along and they'll put a big tent over that building. And everywhere there's a seam, they'll come down on the inside and they'll come down on the outside with duct tape, make sure it's sealed in tight. So none of that asbestos can escape into the atmosphere where people can breathe it. Why not? Well, they don't want people to get sick. And then they'll put up signs. Big sign in English. Black, red, and white. Danger, do not enter. Then again, a lot of times in Spanish. Cuidado, no entrada. They don't want you to go inside. So which one of us is going to walk up, pull out our trusty little X-Acto knife, reach the plastic, cut a nice hole in there, stick our head inside and go, smells good. Well, why not? Well, it's ridiculous. None of us want to get sick. But do you realize Jehovah has slapped that same warning sign on the world today? Danger, do not enter. Cuidado, no entrada. Which of us is going to walk out and just go, the world's atmosphere, it's okay. See, no, we need to flee like Lot did. He tortured himself. Aren't we doing the same thing in today's society? Get out, get away, step away from the unclean thing is what Jehovah has told us. And that is what we want to do. Not only do we need to make changes, as we said, we can't make the changes later. We need to make them now. Maybe changes physically, in our physical appearance. Or if we polluted maybe mentally, starting that world's atmosphere, what it promotes, is it making inroads in us? Maybe morally. Are we starting to conform to the world's morals instead of Jehovah's? Or is it spiritual? Are we living up to the spiritual requirements? Now, oftentimes people say, well, it's really restrictive. Jehovah says, you can't do this and you can't do that. And I want to do how I want to do. And we might not be so eager to make the changes we need to be made. But you realize if we want to get what we want out of life, if we want to get what Jehovah has promised, we not only have to make these changes, we have to make them eagerly. And what do I mean by that? I used to have this dog. Absolutely hated being on a leash. Couldn't stand it. But if you tell that dog, ride, he would tear off to the front door, sit down, tail wagging, waiting to be put on a leash. He was eager to have that leash put on him. Why? Because he was going to get to go. He was going to get to go for a ride. He was going to get to go somewhere. Somehow he was going to go somewhere, and he knew it. He was willing to take on that confinement of the leash in order to make the change out of the house and on the road. Well, are we that same way? Are we eager to make those changes? Do we sit there and look at Jehovah's laws and say, well, it's a little restrictive? I can't do that. Or do we say, well, maybe it's for my own good. Maybe I could make those changes now because what I've got right now isn't what I really want. What I want is what he's promising to me. So we need to make those changes now. And so to the extent that we're eager to change and to the extent that we actually make the changes, we show that we want to live in that cleansed earth. Look over to James chapter 4 this time. James chapter 4, starting there with verse 1. James is here talking about us as individuals and the thing in our minds as brothers and sisters. He wasn't talking to the world. He was talking to brothers. He says, from what source are there wars and from what source are there fights among you? Are not they from this source, namely from your craving for sensual pleasures that carry on a conflict in your members? You desire, and yet you do not have. You go on murdering and coveting, and yet you are not able to obtain. You go on fighting and waging war, and you do not have because you're not asking. You do ask, and you do not receive because you are asking for a wrong purpose, that you may expend it upon your cravings for sensual pleasure. Adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world is constituting himself an enemy of God. See, these brothers had to make changes in their mental outlook, in their spirituality. Is that the same with us? Do we need to make these changes? Remember that warning sign we talked about? This is what Jehovah's saying. In verse 11, quit speaking against one another, brothers. He who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks against law and judges law. Now, if you judge law, you are not a doer of law, but a judge. We want to be very careful in our conversation, and so we don't have a backbiting attitude towards our brothers and our sisters. That we don't say little things that could cause us to act like the world does. No, we're one large family. Now, there's times family doesn't get along, but families usually work things out in the long run. And that's how we have to be among us as a congregation. We might have our disagreements, but if we follow Bible principles, if we make those changes to our spirituality, well, then Jehovah will bless us and help us. We need to make the changes now. Later is going to be too late. Notice what 2 Peter verse 3, verse 11 again tells us. It says, since all these things are thus to be dissolved, what sort of persons ought you to be in holy acts of conduct and deeds of godly devotion? See, he was reasoning on what we just talked about, everything going to be done away. So what are you doing now? How are you showing that you want to be there in that cleansed earth? Well, he says deeds of godly devotion. Are we minding our field service? Are we applying ourselves to brotherly love? The agape that was described, that means we take care of one another. Especially now in this system, we need to hold on to each other as tight as we can. The scriptures also tell us that we need to take care of our parents. Are we doing so? Or are we just dumping that off on somebody else? Taking care of our family spiritually. Yes, are we zealously proclaiming who we are, or do we allow the world to sidetrack us? You could ask yourself this one question, and it comes directly out of our outline. If Jehovah's day were coming very soon, would I be satisfied with what I have been doing? See, our purpose is to worship Jehovah and to live up to his standards. Once again, I close my Bible and I need to keep it open there. But 2 Peter chapter 3. And this time verse 14. Hence, brothers, or hence, beloved ones, since you are awaiting these things, do your utmost to be found finally by him spotless and unblemished and in peace. You see, the world, as we said, dirtiest place it can be, physically, spiritually, morally. Are we allowing that to inflect on us, to start to stain our robes, so to speak? Are we having the world's mud thrown off on us and we can't get it off? Well, now is the time to start to cleanse ourselves, to take away those things, to review our lives, to make changes. What areas do we might need to improve in? Do we need to be made physically, possible physical cleanliness? Are we starting to reflect the spirit of the world? Are we applying ourselves to those deeds of godly devotion? What adjustments do we need to make? There's no doubt, according to the Scriptures, that this cleansed earth is coming. When the world may doubt, we might remember at 2 Peter chapter 3, where they start to laugh at him, saying, where is this promised presence of his? And yet we know that it's coming. Remember Lot's sons, or sons-in-law, future sons-in-law? They laughed at him. He was a madman. Isn't that how the world reacts to us today? You doom and gloomers. You come to my door, you've been saying this for years. It's no better. It's no worse. It's the same. And can you imagine the look on Lot's future son-in-law's face when Lot ran out of town and the fire and sulfur came down? Weren't they wishing they were with him, that they had made those changes right then and there? That's how the world's going to be. As we're sitting there safely, Jehovah's protecting us. What are those around us who laughed at us? Those who derided us going to be looking like? How are they going to feel when they know that now it is too late for the changes to be made? So now is the time to build up our faith. Now is the time to build up those acts of godly devotion. Now is the time to build up our knowledge. And let's make it our resolve to live in a way that demonstrates we want to be in that faithful new world, that cleansed new earth. Well, our friend Carmen has moved on now. As she looks around her, she sees a group of individuals, and there's individuals who are darker skinned and lighter skinned. They come from what used to be called Africa and Asia, United States, Europe, down in South America, North America, all over, and they're all mixing together, and there are no problems. And they've got wonderful food, fruits and vegetables like I've never seen before, and colors that are just unbelievable. And what's that smell in the air? Why is the sky so blue? Where's all the garbage? And what is this? The animals are playing together? See, our friend Carmen is in the cleansed new earth. The question is, will we live to see it too?
Brother Barker, that was a very good, fine talk that you have given us today, and all 80 of us in attendance really did appreciate that fine instruction and the wonderful illustrations that you've given us and the many useful scriptures. We also have a talk next week. It's a Bible discourse entitled, How Should You Serve God? So, of course, we're all invited to this wonderful talk for next week. But this isn't the end of our meeting, of course. We do have our Watchtower study to follow. So now let us give our attention to Brother Urfi, and he will conduct our Watchtower study this morning.